Howdy. Welcome to John's D&D vlog, and welcome to what will probably be my most boring episode ever. I'm sorry, but when it comes to movement, it's just really hard to be shiny and exciting. A lot of folks who play D&D do this thing called theater of the mind. They just let the story unfold verbally. There are no or almost no miniatures. The maps are looked at, but they're mostly considered to be just loose guidelines. That's just the way D&D is for a lot of people. Lots of corners get cut. You have to understand where D&D came from, though. We are a direct descendant of wargaming. I don't know how many of you have done wargaming before, but it's all about the numbers. It's all about keeping track of lots of minor, minuscule pieces of data and then forming strategies from them. Wargaming is very much a game for bean counters. D&D isn't like that, usually. For most of us, the fun comes from the story and from our characters' greater and greater attainment of levels and powers. Even though we are descended from wargaming, we're not at all like them, or at least we don't have to be. Nevertheless, we do have some rules about movement in this game, so let's talk about them a little. From here on out, I'm going to cover two sets of rules. One's from 1st edition, and it seems to try to make things simple. The other is from 2nd edition, and it seems to make things very hard. Let's start with the first. So let's look at the movement rates found in the monster manual. What do you see? First things first, each of the movement rates is expressed in inches. That's because this is how the game is supposed to be played. Each turn, each monster and player is allowed to move up to that many inches on the field. That's easy enough. What else do you see, though? I'll tell you what, let's just look at the movement rates for a whole bunch of monsters. That should make it even easier to see. The movement rate for pretty much all monsters and players is usually a multiple of the number 3. It's not true all the time, but over 90% of the time it is. Why would that be? What's so special about the number 3? I'm actually not sure, so be prepared. Here's some conjecture for you. The impression I had when I read the Dungeon Master's Guide was that Dave and Gary seemed to prefer it when numbers and distances were rounded off to the units that were on the board, square inches or hexes. They liked it neat, it seems. Wargamers, on the other hand, are usually just happy to pull out a tape measure and a protractor and move units to wherever they want them to go. So, if Gary and Dave liked rounding things off to these units on the board, what happens when you have to start moving things diagonally? When you move forward and backward, left or right, moving 3 inches is pretty easy. Just go 3 squares. Diagonals get harder, though, assuming that you want the miniatures to stick to the grid like Dave and Gary seem to prefer. Here's a chart. Hopefully it will solve the 3-inch mystery. In chess, knights move up 2 and then over 1. In D&D, though, to best approximate that 3 inches of movement, characters and monsters would move up 2.5 and then over 1.5 squares. And you would do this for each 3 inches in their movement. According to math, this comes pretty close to 3. It's only 3% off. So maybe this was good enough for Gary and Dave, and maybe it's why all movement for all monsters is always expressed as a multiple of 3 inches. It's an easy method for moving your miniatures around. The good part about this way is that you won't even need a tape measure or a protractor. It will also work even if your map isn't printed out at full scale. What about with hexes? With hexes we have a special problem. Some of the maps in D&D were published with the points on the bottoms. On other maps the hexes had flat edges on the bottoms. Moving 3 diagonally on a hex map is easy. It's built into the design pretty well, just so long as you only go in one of these 6 directions. What about when you need to go in a direction that isn't a multiple of 60 degrees, though? You do a similar trick. Here's the chart. If you do this trick, it will allow you 6 additional directions you can move your miniature in. 30-degree angles instead of just 60. It gives you more detail. Simply just move your miniature 3.5 hexes and place them at the intersection that's there. As it turns out, if you do it this way, it's a pretty close approximation to 3 inches. Another benefit of these methods is that in both instances, you won't need a ruler and you won't need a protractor, and it'll work even if your map isn't printed out to scale. There's something to be said for having a simple method like this. It keeps the game running pretty simply. There are other rules concerning movement in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You can find them on pages 47 to 58 of the 1st edition Dungeon Master's Guide. None of them seem to apply to movement during melee, though, so the above movement method seems to be canon, and is also simple, which is pretty nice. 2nd edition movement is a completely different monster, though. Let's look at how movement rates changed in 2nd edition. This list just features on-land movement rates. Take a look. What you'll notice is that the little quote character that signifies inches is gone now. Other than that, by far, most of the movement rates are still just a multiple of the number 3. So if you wanted to, for the most part, you could still just use that simple 3-inch movement method I showed in the beginning of the video. Like I said in the start though, this will probably be my most boring episode ever. Here's why. In 2nd edition, a whole bunch of new rules showed up that take encumbrance and terrain type and a bunch of other factors into consideration. These new factors add and subtract to your movement rates. This can make for a much more realistic feeling experience for your players, but if you choose to implement them, congratulations, you have now entered Bean Counter country, and the handy-dandiness of the 3-inch movement method I described at the beginning of the video disappears in a heartbeat. If you choose to use these additional rules, I highly suggest that you just go to the store and pick up a cloth tape measure and a protractor for your games. And keeping that in mind, just like with full-fledged wargamers, you won't need a background grid on your maps anymore. If you're not going to stick to it, there's no sense in it being there. Also, because scale will become an extremely important thing to you, it'll be essential that all of your maps are printed out or drawn at perfect scale. So if you like that sort of thing, congratulations. You'll find that keeping track of movement will become almost a game within the game for you. Half of your time will be spent dealing with movement. To speed things up, you might want to have a chart somewhere that you can access easily that will show how these base movement rates will change depending on these factors. This will make it so you won't have to keep doing the math all the time. Here's the one I made. I'll put a link to its PDF in the description area of this video. So, I really don't want a boring video. I was going to show some examples of how these different factors alter characters' movement rates. I guess I can still do that, but I'm not going to talk about it much. I'll just show the page of data I assembled. Those of you who are interested can pause the video and try to understand it better. For those of you who feel like keeping it simple though, like me, perhaps you can just get your DM to develop his own system for giving out arbitrary penalties or bonuses to movement depending on each unique situation. And then if you're trying to stick to the grid, just make sure that the ending location of your miniature is only in the center of a spot or at an intersection. If you're using hexes, you may also have to center your miniature on the middle of a side. This is the second time I've put this video up. One of my viewers had a really obvious question that I laughed about when I first read it, but then after thinking about my explanation of the simple method, I realized that he had a real concern. His question was, but we don't have to use all of our movement, right? We are free to choose to go up to that far, but we don't have to go the whole way, right? Yes, you are free to stop where you wish within that range, assuming nothing else would prevent you from going there. The big strength of the simple method I'm illustrating is that it just allows you to measure diagonal distances without a ruler. It also allows you to measure angles without a protractor. It should make you freer and not constrain you at all. So anyway, now that you know about it, just use it when you need to, I guess. It also appears to explain why all movement rates in D&D are multiples of the number 3. So understanding it might help you better understand how and why D&D became what it did. In its way, it helps you understand a little piece of D&D history. When it comes to aerial combat, things get a little harder. Each monster capable of flight is given an air movement rate. This isn't really the problem. You just use that like you would use any other movement rate. They're also given a maneuverability class. In 1st edition, you'll find it on page 50 of your Dungeon Master's Guide. In 2nd edition, it's listed in the monster manual for each monster data. This class refers to how much turning they can do per round. It changes between 1st and 2nd edition. This chart shows how the classes differ between the editions. But this maneuverability class is also not the main problem. Turns are always in multiples of 30 degrees. And using the simple movement method we showed in the beginning of the video, it's pretty simple to make turns on any sort of a map. Here's where the problem happens. Sometimes creatures simply don't turn very quickly, and it can have a very boring effect on your game. Here's the map for the lower areas of G2, the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Here's a cavern where there are 2 very big white dragons. First of all, a white dragon on foot has a movement rate of 12. They also have a flying rate of 30. What does that mean in this room? The dragons won't be flying much. It will just be the occasional hop, perhaps, sometimes. But if they ever really took off, they would just bounce into the walls of this room like a pinball in a pinball machine. Outside, that's when the big problem happens. Dragons in 1st edition have a maneuverability class of E. This means that they can only turn 30 degrees each round, and they have an aerial movement rate of 30 inches. This means that if they attack you and they want to stay airborne, it's going to take them another 11 minutes to get back to you to perform their second attack. And after the first attack, they're going to be like 30 inches perhaps away from you. which puts them out of range for most spells and for most ranged attacks. I don't know about you, but waiting 11 minutes to get the second attack in sounds like a very long time. A person could take a nap in that amount of time, you know? When we tried to implement it into our own games, it actually became pretty boring. In 2nd edition, it got a little better. White Dragons got a maneuverability class of C instead. It sped things up. Still, though, only one attack every 4 rounds is also a little boring. I understand why folks seem to prefer Theater of the Mind. So, when it comes to maneuverability classes, so far I haven't had a lot of luck or fun with it. Perhaps those of you who have had more success than me about this, perhaps you could tell us how you did it in the comments section of the video below. Well, I'm done. I guess that wasn't so bad. When it comes to movement, I guess it's just up to you. Do you want to keep it simple, or do you want more detail? Theater of the Mind solves a lot of problems, but it would be nice to be able to use the miniatures as well. It can make for a more organized and perhaps better envisioned campaign. For the record, you might want to also check out my episode on miniatures. That's episode number 10. Anyway, thanks a lot. As you may have noticed, I've had a little more free time recently. I may be able to do a few more videos soon. We'll see how it goes. Have good games, and as always, have a nice day.